Well, good evening and welcome to Itawamba Community College, the David C. Cole Student Services Building. You are in paradise. I want you to enjoy every bit of it. So thank you for being here. This is a wonderful event that our community relations has partnered, and as ICC commemorates the Mississippi Bicentennial with Celebrating Mississippi, an evening of reflection featuring Mr. Walt Grayson. He has his lovely wife Joe here tonight. Thank you for being here. And the evening will include a short presentation by Mr. Grayson. I watch you all the time. You got that soothing voice right there. Puts me to sleep pretty quick now. I'm just kidding. Your programs are very entertaining. And we have Brother Rogers. Now, I've never met Mr. Grayson or Brother Rogers. And so I was trying to figure out what denomination he was, but it really didn't have anything to do with the religion. Evidently his brother nicknamed him, his name's William, but he goes by Brother. So welcome, Brother. And also, we have one of our own that will be here. Dean Birchfield has just been an icon at the college for 37 years. 36? Somewhere in there. But Dean Birchfield has just been a wonderful, wonderful person for us right there. So we have a lot of students, ICC students, and I know we have some high school students here, but you know, we are really proud of Itawamba Community College and the student population that we have. If you're a student, would you just raise your hand? Good. And how many points did you get? Bribed a little bit by saying if you show up, you get 10, 15 points right here at finals. That's okay. Whatever it takes right there. So again, one thing I do want to mention is the First Ladies here tonight, my partner in life, Marcia Lee Eaton. And thank you for coming, loving this stage and coming out. Thank you very much. And I thank the community for coming in, and I know we got a lot of people here. Great turnout. So this will be a very informative evening. Let's kick back and enjoy that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Eaton. So to start out with, my name is Tyler Camp. I'm Director of Development here at Itawamba Community College. It is very exciting to see this large of a crowd here tonight, so give yourself a pat on the back for being here. We're very excited to host you tonight, as the President said. So all of this came about from Mississippi celebrating its 200th year of statehood this year. The birthday is actually in December. And the Itawamba County Bicentennial Committee was actually awarded a grant from the Mississippi Humanities Council to host celebrations and events throughout this year to commemorate the statehood of our great state. Now, we do invite you to follow us on Facebook at MS200 Itawamba. We will be posting things throughout the year to invite you to join us at all of these great events that showcase not only Mississippi but also Itawamba County. But tonight, we are here to celebrate not only our great state, but take a brief trip back on the history of where Mississippi has been to where we are today. Now, if you didn't know, you're actually in the midst of a star tonight, Mr. Walt Grayson. A fifth-generation Mississippian, born and raised in Greenville with roots right here in Itawamba County. His interest in broadcasting started at an early age with his first job at a Greenville station while he was still in high school. Walt joined the WLBT TV team as a weather anchor in 1984. Now, Walt takes viewers on a look around Mississippi on weekdays with WLBT, and he has become a household name with our favorite television program on Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Mississippi Roads. Now, Mississippi Roads provides an insider's guide into the towns, the events, the attractions, history, art, music, food, the natural beauty, and intriguing citizens of our great state. Now, Walt also writes a monthly newspaper article and is the author of 4 books. Now, let's see if we can get these 4 books right. Jackson and the Good Life, Looking Around Mississippi with Walt Grayson. Now the next two are my favorite. Looking Around Mississippi Some More with Walt Grayson. Now that was awarded the Mississippi Library Association's Nonfiction Book of the Year in 2008. And last but not least, oh, that reminds me, more homegrown Mississippi stories with Walt Grayson. Now Walt is a member of the Associated Press Mississippi Broadcasters Hall of Fame. Now, before I tell you any more, and I don't think you need any more because you hear his voice at home, you see him on TV, and he is an icon for us here in our great state, a citizen of our great state that we are proud of, and we are proud to host you tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podium Mississippi broadcasting legend, Mr. Walt Grayson.
All right. Before we start, I need to do something. Got your camera ready? Okay. Get the other one again. Okay, that goes on Facebook, so. And I want to make sure we had the Etowah Community College in there. Let's see, I don't really know where to start. Of course, I said that one time, I went someplace and said, I don't know where to start. Somebody back in the back said, start toward the end. So I could start toward the end. And students, I appreciate the students being here, but it reminded me of when I was in Mississippi College, which is a Baptist college, and every once in a while we'd have these professional Baptists that would come through and speak in chapel, and if we happened to be in a Bible class, which if you're in Mississippi College, you have to take some of those along whether you want to or not. But that happened to be my major, so I was in a Bible class, and I don't know who the speaker was, but we had this speaker that came through, and so after the professor called roll, he said, okay, we're going to all go upstairs into the chapel. I've already called roll, and so I won't know whether you actually go up there or not, since you've already been counted present. However, God will know if you don't go up there, and God will get you. And this little voice in the back of the room said, well, he didn't the last time. So whether you have to be here or for credit or whatever, thank y'all for coming out. And as far as recollections and memories and things like that, this is the perfect place for me to come to Etowah County because this is where Grandma lived. My grandmother lived in Fulton. And I grew up in the Delta. And so Delta is home and humdrum and everyday life and drudgery and all that. The hills, to me, was fun because we came to Grandma's house and we had cousins, just galore. I don't even know how many cousins I've got. It was a big family back then. But we had lots of cousins and we came to Grandma's house and it was always fun at Grandma's house. And so I have always, even today, when I have to come to Fulton to do a job for Mississippi Roads and its work, it's still more fun coming here than it is going other places. So I still enjoy coming to Fulton, although it has changed drastically. My grandfather was born in 1875, and he died, I was about 3 years old when he died. I still remember him though. But Fulton, you've got to think, Fulton was a very different place back about 1952 or 1953. I can't imagine what my grandfather would think. But first of all, he wouldn't know what a McDonald's is. But to think that Fulton has a McDonald's, he would have never heard of an interstate highway, but to think that Fulton has an interstate going through it, and that they make cars within, 25, 30 miles from here? If rolling over in your grave is possible, if you're ever up in the Oak Grove Cemetery, up around Mantache's, actually goes out at Radley, that noise you hear at night will be my grandfather rolling over in his grave. And my grandmother saying, Al Swan, all at the same time. Now, I'll tell you about my grandfather and my grandmother's grave, but don't let me forget, because my wife wants me to tell you about this season of Mississippi Roads, but let me tell you about this before I tell you about that. And then Probably before I get this out, I'll think of something else to say before all of it. I do my speeches backwards, is what it is. My grandfather worked in timber all of his life. And one day, drug this huge petrified stump up from Tombigbee River bottom or somewhere, I don't know where he got it, put it down at the end of the porch and told grandmother that he wanted that as his tombstone. Since he worked in wood all of his life, since he worked in timber, he thought that it was appropriate that his tombstone be this petrified stump. And we kids played on it because it was great diving. It was just far enough off the porch that we could get a run across the porch, jump on that stump, and then jump on out and hit the ground. And of course now it would break every bone in our bodies if we tried to do that. But then it was fun, you know. And grandmother didn't think anything about it until one day, a stonemason came out and affixed the nameplate on there with his name and his birth date on there. And of course, you know, they leave the death date, unless you've got a real good clairvoyant, they leave the death date, you know, for the appropriate time. And so grandmother brought her out and wanted her to see it. And so she said, "So you're really going to use this as your tombstone?" He said, "Well, yes, I've worked in timber all my life. It's only appropriate that I use a piece of petrified wood as my tombstone." She wiped her hands on her apron, headed back toward the kitchen. She said, "Well, in that case, when I die, y'all can just use the door off the oven." Which we didn't, but and now then, let's see, and Joe was talking, the mention of Mississippi roads. This was the weirdest season of Mississippi roads. We finally, thank God, got through shooting roads. As a matter of fact, it was so recently that I just, day before yesterday, got my invoice turned in for the shooting for the season. And it started off, we have a new producer for roads. And we went for 10 years with the same producer, and then he got a promotion. Since then, we've had a new producer every year. And every new producer that we get has this great idea of how to improve roads. My thinking is, we got it down to where that it's easy. Let's don't go improving things. Let's just go keep doing what we're doing. And so this year's improvement, though, was they wanted to do all of the stand-ups, which that's what we do to introduce the stories. Is when I come on and I say something about the next story that's coming up. She wanted to do all of the stand-ups in the studio. Have you ever seen the CBS Sunday morning show, Sunday morning on CBS? Okay. Hopefully you watch that before you go to church, right? That's right, okay. But that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to do this similar to Charles Osgood's, which now it's Jane Pauley doing it. Now watch before I go to church. CBS Sunday morning. And they wanted to do it in the studio. Of course, we don't have the budget that CBS has. You know, we don't have the crew. We don't have the people that can do all of this stuff. And so they had these dinky pictures hanging from fishing line that when the air conditioner came on, they started swinging in the breeze back behind us. And the worst thing about it is, she asked me, "Do you want makeup?" And you know, high definition television, you get a little shiny. So I said, "Well, yeah, makeup would be okay." So they hired this makeup person that I thought, you know, she's going to dab on, you know, maybe wipe on a good night's sleep and a shave, and then, you know, a little powder, and that was it. But no. I mean, there was not one freckle of my real skin that showed through this 1/4 inch of makeup that this person put on me. And the first time I looked at it, I looked over at the mirror and I said, "Why don't he look natural?" And I had to come home and show Joe what they'd done to me. Thank goodness they decided that they did not like the stand-ups in the studio. I told her that, you know, doing the stand-ups in the studio is okay, but the title of the show is Mississippi Roads. Why don't we go out on the road and do these stand-ups? And finally, but they didn't throw the stand-ups, the studio stand-ups out because of my awful makeup. They threw it out because way back over the back of the studio, there was a shadow that they didn't like. And I'm thinking, thank God for shadows. I mean, it's their show, and it's way above my pay grade for them to tell them, hey, this doesn't look right, you know, because the next thing you know, they put you in charge of that, you know, and so I decided not to say anything about it, but if you are a contributor to public broadcasting, then they send out this little, I think it's called Fine Tuning, the Fine Tuning magazine. My picture is on the front of Fine Tuning magazine this month, and the picture that they used is one of those that I had all that makeup on. I came home, I showed it to Joe and said, here, save this. You already got a picture of me in my death mask. But I do a lot of running around Mississippi. I get to do it for a living. It is a lot of fun. I've learned a lot of things about our state. I think, hang on a second, there's two or three things I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, so I wrote them down. I never write things down. My wife's looking at these. This is the grocery list. So, no, the few things that I remember, I just wanted to mention some of these things. Some stories that I remember about Fulton, since this is Fulton, Itawamba County, and I grew up here, some things that I remember, some of our family stories, and then hopefully all this will tie back together at the end. If not, then you will have heard some of my family stories. The house that my grandfather built almost 100 years ago, I think he built it in 1924, is back on Sandland Road, which is kind of back over in the south part of town. It's still standing there, and I've got a set of cousins that live in the house now. My aunt, my oldest aunt, told me that her and then my oldest uncle, and all of these people have passed away now, but they rode out here one night with my grandfather in the back of a wagon. There wasn't any cars then. They came out in the back of a wagon because he wanted to lay that house out by the North Star so that he would make sure that it was facing south. And you don't want your house facing east, you get the morning sun, and you don't want it facing west because it gets too hot in the afternoon. And so I don't know why I remember that story, but I thought that was just neat that my grandfather had enough sense, or did not have a compass, one or the other, that he wanted to come out and lay out his house by the position of the North Star. Later, when we were all kids and would come to Grandma's house for Christmas, we had an uncle who we were outside at night, and he pointed up in the sky at this bright star, speaking of stars. And he told all of us 6, 7, 8-year-old, Christmas Eve, he told all of us, there, that's the wise men's star of the East. And we were, that's the next best thing to see in Santa Claus, you know. We were, ooh, the star. It was years later that I realized he was pointing toward Venus setting in the west. Had I been out here when Granddaddy laid out that house, I would have known north, south, east, and west. There's the house that the hill that the house is on. When my mother, was a child, would say that they would go out in the springtime after the spring plowing, when they plowed up the ground, after the first rain, they could go out in the fields and pick up bushel baskets of arrowheads. And so and Granddaddy had 1,000 arrowheads at least, and so there was a big association with Indian lore when we got to Fulton at the old house. And there was this closet at the top of the stairs. Back in it was the chimney from the stove and the oven, and then back behind that, no one knew because we weren't allowed to go in there. I don't know why we weren't allowed to go in there. Probably, well, I don't know. I still don't know. Because we were little kids and probably they thought we would get hurt. To keep us out, they called that the Indian closet. I guess they thought we would think there was an Indian in there. And for many years it worked. So that's one of the associations I have here. My grandfather, before he moved to Fulton, ran the telephone exchange. He's a very progressive man. Now, the telephones hadn't been invented that long, but he had a telephone exchange between Ratcliffe and Mantachie. And my aunt, the same aunt that told me about coming out, you know, when they were laying out the house, my aunt said that back in 1910, when Halley's Comet came around, said that she said, oh, you should have, because she was an operator there with my granddaddy's telephone exchange. She said, oh, you should have heard these old women. They were so scared. Said they were selling off all their stuff. They were talking about how the world was going to come to an end. And she told that story several times. After I got to be an adult, it dawned on me that she had been listening in on the phone conversations. And I asked her about it. I said, Aunt Cat, you mean you listened to the phone calls? She said, oh yeah, we didn't have radio out here yet. I think my love of cemeteries, which I love, listen, I love any cemetery I can walk out of. You know, we actually had one producer of Mississippi Roads that told me, quit it. Just stop. Just talk to some live folks for a while and stay away from the cemetery. But I think I got my love of cemeteries from up here, because every time we'd come up for a family reunion, we would caravan out to Mantachie or past Mantachie on out to Ratliff to Oak Grove Cemetery to visit all the relatives, that 5 generations that are buried out here. And some of the people that I was with had known some of the people who were buried there. Others were so far back, all they knew were their names. But we got introduced to them. And of course, as kids, we would get bored with that for a little while. After all, the grown-ups were still putting flowers and visiting from grave to grave. And we'd go around and see how many graves were over 100 years old. And of course, now they're over 160 years old. But I've learned to love cemeteries because it was so much fun going and visiting that cemetery. Now that Mom and Dad are buried up there, and we got to go up there tomorrow because we got to shoot part of a story up there about the ceramic tombstones, thank you, that were made up in this part of the country. And I know they're in that cemetery. They're in others, but I know they're there, so we're going to go up there and get some shots of that. When we would come up to Fulton, I'd look for the landmarks, the washerwoman sign. Do y'all remember? Anybody remember that in Tupelo? That lit up at night. It was animated neon. You know, yeah, Long's, wasn't it? Was that Long's Laundry? Okay, that was the sign that we were getting here. Somewhere back in time, there was a motor court between here and Tupelo called the Star. It had something to do with the Star because it had a neon star. We always got here, by the way, after dark. Because Daddy didn't leave Greenville until the mail ran in the afternoon, and it was about a 5-hour trip over here. So we would have so that's one thing, that all these memories, you know, you come back and you look at these landmarks now, or you look for them now, and you see what's still here, and you see what has changed. And some things have changed for the better, some things are about the same, and some things aren't as good as they used to be. So that's one thing. That's one thing that history is good for, is you can use history as landmarks. You can go back and see what used to be here, and you compare that to what we've got now. Well, is what we have now, is it better than what we had then? Is it not as good as what we had then? How has it changed? You know, so all of these memories, these things, and study of history. This is something you can gauge your progress by, or your lack of, or your regress, your progress or your regress by that. I think the big thing is, though, that as kids, coming up here to my grandmother's house, and going out to the cemetery, and seeing our ancestors that were buried there, we, without ever being told, discovered that we were a part of something way bigger than ourselves. And that we were an active part of it, and we had a responsibility to contribute to what was to come from that, in as far as like the next generation, and then the generation after that. We realized something had been handed to us by all the names and all the pictures and all the stories that had been told to us, all the family stories about my grandfather, who was the original Ghostbuster. Anytime there was a ghost story in Etowah County, he would not rest until he disproved it. I wish I could take him on some of my ghost hunts. When, you know, they got that little voice box now, you know, that they can ask the ghost questions and the ghost, you know, answers. I was with a group of ghost hunters one night, and along about 2 o'clock in the morning, they got their ghost box out, and this ghost box started saying, Walt. And I went, oh, that's cute. The ghost said my name. A few minutes later, said, Walt. So, well, that ghost is still calling my name. A few minutes later, Walt. And I said, oh, gosh, look at the time. Man, I've got to go. So, I don't know whether Granddad would have believed those ghost stories or not, but I don't know that I do. I ran across a guy, by the way, who has written 30 ghost story books. I interviewed him at Mary Hope in Meridian. He's written 30 ghost story books, and I asked him, well, do you believe in ghosts? He says, yeah, I'm coming to pretty close to it. So any budding writers out there, there's your proof. You don't even necessarily have to believe what you write. Just be convincing, which is kind of what we do when we do weather. We don't have to believe it, just say it with a straight face. We were somewhere last night, we were at church last night, all of a sudden, I do go talk at churches every once in a while. I don't tell this to a whole lot of people, but I am an ordained Southern Baptist minister. I don't have a church. I don't want any part of a church. I get very much. I pastored a little church while I was in college, and that was a part of my education. I educated myself real quickly. This is not what God wants me to do. But I do occasionally go to churches, and as a matter of fact, I can still legally marry folks. I don't like to. Part of my job at Channel 3 is being the weatherman, and occasionally they will ask me, somebody will ask me to marry them. I said, well, if you really want me to, but do you realize if the weatherman marries you, you only have about a 30% chance of staying together. So where was I? I was talking about, so we were at a church last night, and somebody made the comment, and I hadn't really thought about it, that kids nowadays don't get to go to family reunions like we did when we were youngsters. And I realized that thinking back in my family, me and my brothers, man, when I was growing up, we would go spend the night with my aunts and my uncles from Faraday, Louisiana, all the way to Philadelphia, Mississippi, up here to Fulton. And did this all the time. And we don't do that with my brothers and my sisters. And I realized my daughter doesn't know her cousins, not nearly as well as I knew my cousins. Yeah, it is pretty sad. That's my wife that said that. I agree with her. I better agree with her. I got to ride home with her. If I don't agree with her, she won't try. But I think the upshot of that is kids today don't hear the family stories like I heard. You know, they don't, and when we got together, when I first came up to grandmother's house up here, it was before Channel 9 in Tupelo came on, and before Channel 4 in Columbus came on, so she had no television. The only entertainment they had at night was to sit around and tell stories about each other, or on each other, and there is a subtle difference there. And they would tell the story, and you'd want to get your story in there, but somebody would change the subject right before you got your story in. But kids nowadays don't get to hear that. And I don't know that kids nowadays understand the importance of history, because family history, knowing the importance of my family history is what translated over into my love of history. Because I realize it's the same thing. You go out and you find out that you're a part of something a whole lot bigger than you are. And it's something that's been handed down to you. And it's your responsibility to make sure that it stays intact and gets handed down to the next person. And I really, you know, I don't know. Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. Now then, it'd be good if I would stop right there, but now I'm just getting started. So, but anyway, that's the point. History is so important. And the love of history, my love of history starts and my love of storytelling starts back in the living room at my grandmother's house on Sandon Road in Fulton, Mississippi, at family reunions when we couldn't wait for supper to be finished so we could sit around and listen to the old folks talk. So, now then. So let me tell you a few of my favorite stories around the state. I love Rodney. Does anybody know where Rodney is? I see those hands. Rodney used to be about as important as the two cities that it's in between. It's right about halfway in between Natchez and Vicksburg, and it's on the Mississippi River. And at one time, it was as important a river port as Vicksburg and Natchez. But right after the Civil War, a sandbar built up in the Mississippi River had kicked the river about 2 miles back out to the west of Rodney. And when it did, a river port just almost needs a river. So as the river moved away, Rodney really literally dried up. And to where it's just pretty much a ghost town down there now. There are two churches that are really neat in Rodney. One, if you saw the James Brown movie, the Get On Up, the life story of James Brown, the Boyhood Church shown in the movie is one of those churches in Rodney. Fortunately, the movie company wanted to use that church because after the 2011 flood, put about 11 feet of water up in that church, one of the walls buckled, and the church was about to fall down. And the movie company put about $15,000 into the church and stabilized it to where that it will at least be standing until the next person comes along that wants to fall in love with that church and put a few more $1,000s into it. The other church is the old Rodney Presbyterian Church. It's federal style architecture. It was built in 1832, but the population of Rodney had dwindled so much that by 1922 they quit having regular services in there. The fascinating thing to me about it is it still has a cannonball lodged in the front of it from where it took a shelling from a Union gunboat during the Civil War. Now, there used to be a whole lot more people living in Rodney than now because, well, for one thing, a lot of them died off because they were elderly, most of them. And then the other thing is the 2011 flood, and there was the other big flood on the Mississippi River. We've had one. We've had 3 500-year floods this decade on the Mississippi River. So I think we're going to have to change our parameters a little bit. But anyway, the last flood wiped out everything that was down in the flat. And so hardly anybody lives there now. But I remember one day, I was back there in Rodney, and I don't remember his name, and I wished I did. But this elderly black man came up to me while I was out in front of the Presbyterian church. And he knew who I was from television, so we chatted for a second. And he says, yeah, Walt, he says, when people come down here to see this church, he said, I ask them, would you like to become an official member of the Rodney Presbyterian Church? And most of them will go, oh, yeah, sure. And he says, so I takes off my hat, and I bows my head, and I says a few words, oh, Lord, and he went on and on like that for a few minutes. And he said, then I says amen, and I tell him, now, you are an official member of the Rodney Presbyterian Church. And the first thing we're going to do, take up a collection. And he got my $3. That's the best entertainment I ever had. I think I'll just go ahead and tell them the bathroom story, then we'll take questions. I'll tell you this about Mississippi, what I have discovered about it, because when I was a kid, pretty much all I knew is I knew what was between Greenville and Fulton. And that was that we had the Delta, and at Greenwood you had that long hill, and you came up into the hills. And then you went through Stewart, Kilmichael, oh gosh, I forgot. Tom Nolan, Kilmichael, Stewart, that's the way it goes. Because my mother would always say, those towns make a sentence. So what do you mean? He says, Tom Nolan, Kilmichael, Stewart. Springs like a headline. We pat her on the hand. Yes, mother. Yes, but and I thought I would thank you for reminding me of that, brother. And then I knew what was between my house and school and my house and church, and that was about all I knew. It was only after I began doing Look Around Mississippi for Channel 3 and Mississippi Roads that I discovered that my own place where I lived in the Delta is the birthplace of American music. Of course, I grew up on the Beatles. That dates me. I have, gosh, how old is Kaylee? I probably don't even want to say now. She's 28 now. When our 28-year-old granddaughter was about 15, she found one of my Beatle albums, and she loves the Beatles. And so she said, "Pops, can I play this?" And I thought, "Well, sure." Then I realized, this child doesn't know how to play a record. So she said, "What do you do?" I said, "We take the record, pull it out of the sleeve, you put it on the turntable with the little doohickey sticking up, put it right through the hole in the middle, then you take the arm and you set it over on the edge of the record." And she did that, and music came out of the speakers. I don't think Thomas Edison, when he invented the phonograph, could have been more excited than Kaylee when music came off of this hunk of plastic. And she went, "Oh boy, how do you get it to play the second track?" The Beatles that I grew up on, listening to Beatle music, they grew up listening to Muddy Waters, who lived 45 miles down the road from me. I'd never heard of Muddy Waters till after I heard of the Beatles. And now then, thank goodness, we got places like the Grammy Museum, the Blues Museum, the B.B. King Museum, which I met B.B. King one time, and because B.B. King started out playing gospel music. And I asked him, I said, "Why did you switch over to blues?" He said, how did you put it? He said, he says, I'm pretty good at music, he said, but I always considered myself a superstar at driving a tractor. And I forgot what plantation he said he worked for. He said, but I made $22.50 a week driving a tractor. He said, on the weekends, though, I could bring my guitar in to Indianola. And when I played a gospel song, people would pat me on the head and then say, "That's great, son, you're going to be great." But they wouldn't give me a tip. He said, now, if I played a blues song, sometimes they'd buy me a hamburger, sometimes a beer, give me a little bit of money. He says, now, if you got any further questions as well, I left gospel. But he was a very nice man that we got in. And if you've never been to the B.B. King Museum over in Indianola, all of those are class museums. They're wonderful, and we're so fortunate to have them here in Mississippi. I've been in this part of the state. Of course, you got Elvis. My favorite Elvis story is I had to come up here and do a story about Elvis for some kind of bicentennial thing we were running. And of course, Elvis was dead. You can't exactly go interview Elvis. At least most people still think he's dead. But I came up and got a lot of shots of like the Elvis birthplace and things like that. And I wanted to get a picture of the front of the Tupelo hardware store, because that's where Elvis got his first guitar. And I didn't want to do it without asking permission. So I went in and asked the folks, if you've ever been in there, does the Booth family still own it? I'm not sure if they do. These folks, they will kill you with kindness. They're the nicest people in the world. I went in, I introduced myself. I'm Walt, Grayson, WOBT in Jackson. I want to get a picture of the front of the store because I'm doing a story about Elvis. The guy shook my hand and said, come on in. Said, we just had the BBC in here last week. We've got this office that's elevated in the middle of the store. You can put your camera up here and you can get a sweep of the entire interior of the store. And I'm thinking, I really didn't want the interior. I just want a front shot, but he's being so nice. I'm sure not going to insult him by not getting that shot. So I hosed down the store, kind of like a fireman would hose down a fire, and I thanked him and we started walking out. And we got next to this counter, and he stopped. And he put his hand on top of the counter, and he says, now this is the very counter where Elvis got his first guitar. And I knew something important had happened there, because on the floor, there's this duct tape X